Hi folks, welcome back to the Cabin Fly Shop. Today Chris and I are doing some more fly patterns from around the Great Lakes region. This happens to be one of those. This is an adaptation from a muddler minnow. We just dubbed the fly a Madonna. Me and a client of mine kind of come up with this fly. The original one was kind of a buff color or a blonde, which is where we came up with Madonna. And then the fly has so much motion, like razzle dazzle. It's like, all right, hey, Madonna seems to fit. Quite similar to a kiwi muddler, with the exception that a kiwi muddler is lashed down on the hook shank. This is not. So it literally, the tail is free moving, unlike the kiwi muddler. So it has more motion. We tie this fly in all kinds of colors. Olive is probably the #1 color, followed by probably the ginger color, the barred ginger color, black, white, yellow, just a tremendous fly. We tie a muddler head on it, so it looks like a sculpin. We fished a lot of these flies on the Pine River here in Michigan, and there's a lot of sculpins in the pine. So this was one of our go-to flies back in the day, and this fly's been around a long time, at least 25 years, maybe a little longer. It's simple materials. The hook is a 4X long, 1X strong streamer hook, either with a ring eye or a turn down eye. Pick your poison there on brand. The body is made up of a couple things. First of all, we like to weight this fly, so I'm using 25 thousandths lead. I'm going to do 10 wraps of that just behind the head. Sparkle tinsel that's woven into a yarn is called mylar tinsel. Mylar yarn, excuse me. I like gold for the olive, for the yellow, for the ginger. I use some clear or some pearl in the white and the black. You know, use your imagination there. A few sprigs of crystal flash or flashaboo. This happens to be crystal flash. Zonker strip in Magnum, either barred or unbarred, your pleasure there. This happens to be barred olive. And then deer hair for spinning. You know, make sure your deer hair has nice large diameters here at the base, not too much down. Typical hair for spinning is after the deer have gone through summer. That's about the time, the earliest deer that you can get, so that the follicles start to fatten and get air cells in them for winter coats, but not too much down that you have to clean out of it. All deer hair is not created equal. You know, the smaller diameter hairs are good for upright wings, parachute wings, spent wings, because they're small diameter and they don't have a lot of the air cells in it, so they don't flare. But for spinning, you want the air cells in it so it flares. I'll show you when we get to that part of the fly. So let's tie this fly. So let's hook up a 4X long, 1X strong. We're going to take this lead and we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we'll just use the deep end of the scissors for trimming. And then I just roll that cut end off in tight. We want to leave enough space up here to build and spin our deer hair head. So let's attach this now. I'm using 50 denier GSP. It's very strong, pretty small in diameter. What we want to do is just lock that in place, so make several wraps. Now what we want to do is we want to build a ramp here, because you can see that's a pretty steep spot to jump materials up on. So let's build a thread ramp right there to come up onto that lead. And there's another little trick to doing this I'll show you in a second. That we're trying to do is make a smooth transition right here. It takes a little bit of time, but cosmetically makes a difference, functionally makes no difference. So there's the ramp and the lead. Excuse me. If you want to keep this from oxidizing, and lead does that, it taints the hook, and just the reaction between the different kinds of metals, go ahead and coat that lead with head cement. And that will help you a long ways down the road with bleeding of that oxidation out onto the materials in the wing. So I'm going to help that ramp by running this material right up to the lead. And this is the Mylar yarn, Tinsel yarn. So I'm just wrapping it right up to there. I'm going to snip out the excess. We're still going to have a bit of a step up there, but not as much as we would have. So then we're going to come up to the front. We're good to go. All right. Now you can, with a rotary vise, you could either spin this, or we can wrap it by hand. I'll wrap this one by hand because not everybody has a rotary. Just concentric wraps right up the shank. You can see now our building of that ramp paid off, because now we've got a nice smooth transition up onto our 10 wraps of 25 thousandths lead. Come right up to the front of the lead. Tie that off. 3 wraps will do it. Snip that out. Okay, now we want to build a base here, just of one up and one down on the base, just to have our materials bind a little better on top of the thread rather than on the hook shank. The next step is to attach the rabbit. I'm going to turn this to the camera so you can see. What I'm going to do is cut a little bit of a triangle for a tie-in point. You can see that triangle there. And then I'm also going to take just a touch of the hair off the tip of that triangle so that we're tying in on the leather of the rabbit hide rather than on top of the fur. So here we go. We're going to attach that. Now that's going to go right in front of the lead, and you can see how that collapses in front of the lead, and I'm going to put a lot of pressure on that, because what we don't want is that rabbit hide to come out of there. So that's attached really well. So typically you'd want to go about half the distance between the tie-in point and the hook bend here to snip this off. So that's what we're going to do, because we want lots of movement on this. And there's the length of the fly. So it's about 50% beyond the bend of the hook there for tail length. Next, we're going to tie in the crystal flash. This happens to be olive. Again, pick your poison on this. Some of the flies I used to tie, I would use, Fire Tiger, Flashaboo. Really is a nice material. This is a little more delicate. Couple wraps, Fold that back so it locks it in. Bingo. Trim it off to the end of the tail. Now, we're good to go. I'm just going to build a little base here because deer hair, I'm going to stack this deer hair, one on the top, one on the bottom, so we get a nice, beautifully proportioned, stacked collar for this fly. So I'll snip out, oh, I don't know, half the size of a pencil. Brush the butts so that you get that down out of there if there is any down. We'll slip it into our stacker. Give it a couple taps. Comes out of the stacker beautifully, as you see. So we'll tie this first in on the bottom. The collar. Here's the body. We're going to split the body right in half, so the collar is going to go right there, just like that. Nice big collar. Hold that with your left, go around this twice, right straight down with the flare, because we don't want this to spin. I give it 3 wraps. You can see how that looks on the bottom of the fly with none on the top of the fly, because we're going to add another clump equal size to the top. Get some down out of there. A couple taps in the stacker. We're good to go. Again, we'll measure this against the tips of the deer hair that we put on the bottom. Around once, around twice, flare. Now the reason I'm using GSP is because it's almost impossible to break. So it's really good for spinning deer hair. So now we're just going to brush that back so we can bring our thread up in front. And now we're going to spin. One more clump and this fly is done besides the trimming. So we'll just get a nice clump of deer hair. I like to point the tips out towards the front so I don't confuse them with the collar tips. We're going to go around that twice. And here we go. Push that back, jump up in front, and whip finish. Okay, stand the hair up, and we're ready to trim. So I'm going to take that out of the vise. Now, some people use the razor blade thing. It's all good. I just didn't grow up with that, so I'm a hand trimmer. So we're going to trim right back to our collar hairs, tips. We're going to taper the side here a little bit. And now we're going to taper the top. I want this to kind of look like a bullet. Only takes a couple seconds to do this. Get all the butts trimmed out so you don't look like a rookie. If there's a butt or two sticking out, you can just pull them out. They come out just fine. And there's what the finished fly looks like. Now, if you want this fly to last forever, here's what I do. I'll rotate the fly like this. You can see I've got it trimmed fairly flat on the bottom. I like to do that. It makes the fly kind of like a diver. I'm going to put some head cement right on the bottom, and I'm going to leave that fly upside down for just a second so that can penetrate down around the shank of the hook. This also gives you a little better view of how long that rabbit strip is, 50% of the body beyond the bend of the hook, what the fly looks like inside out and backwards. That is the quintessential fly we dubbed the Madonna. Tie it in a variety of sizes. I've seen them tied down as small as size 10. This happens to be a size 6 in a 4X long. I tie them as big. I've tied them as big as 2s for big sculpin patterns. This is about the size that I love to fish, which is about 2.5 to 3 inches long, which is a typical olive slimy sculpin in the Michigan watersheds. So there you have it, simple fly. It's a sculpin inside out and backwards. A lot of people call them muddlers for a short kind of a slang term. The lead keeps it down. We fish it with a sink tip. If you're in really skinny water with the lead in it, you can also fish it with a floating line. But I prefer to fish this with a sink tip and give it lots of motion. So have fun tying it, have fun fishing it, and we're glad you joined us. Thanks again.